was a very, very long time ago, and it's dawn. It's in that thin, thin light you get just before dawn if you've woken up, and it's all silvery. That time in the morning when hardly anyone's awake, and this young woman sets out on her horse into a forest. She's very young, very sad. She's leaving her home because her husband had died not long before. She's got no children to keep her company. And her hope is that she can get to the distant market town and sell her horse in order to buy bed and board until she can get herself a job. Because she's young and sad, but she's very feisty. And she's got no intention of waiting by her fireside for old age to come calling and making her lonely. She wants to make a new life among people in the town. So the wood was dark when she mounted her pony and she kicked it on, and it was cold, and her breath, you know how your breath curls away from your face sometimes in great swirls when you breathe out with your chin. She pulled her husband's woolen coat around her, kicked her pony on, and she rode silently past the little stone cottages and farms, and she could almost feel the sleepers in their bedrooms, wrapped in their dreams behind the leaded windows, and the moon crossing the sky, and the cold air pulling her into the wood. And the wood was dark, but there was a moon, just managing to light her way. The moon was sinking already because it was getting close to morning. And as she rode her pony through the wood, the woman could almost feel the creatures of the night settling down because day was coming. She could hear hedgehogs snuffling back to banks of dry leaves. She could see the moths all sleepy settling on the ivy leaves that wound their way up the oak trees. And out of the night, a white snowy owl appeared like a ghost on its way home from its night hunt. And she could also feel the creatures of the day starting to rise from their dreams. And she felt, this young woman, on her own on this horse, like she was in a magical place, a passing place. Because the air felt busy with the exchange of night for day. She felt like anything could happen. And as she rode her pony, it rocked her. Has anyone here ever ridden a horse or a pony? Yeah, you have. So you all know that it rocks you, doesn't it?
Today, I've been on a donkey.
Have you? And did it rock you like this?
No.
Oh, I'm so good it didn't rock me. This woman in her pony, she was rocked like she was in a cradle. Because it was still very early, she felt her eyelids flicker and she felt herself sinking into sleep. And just as she was about to fall deep into that sleep, a sleek, dark figure leapt out of the bushes right next to her pony, and she started in the saddle as it darted past her, and it streaked its way in front of her, straight through the forest. It was small, but it was a sturdy-looking thing, brown like this. All brown fur and sinew, and its two long ears were a dead giveaway. It wasn't a rabbit, it was a relative of the rabbit. It was a hare. Yeah. And this hare streaked its way into a clearing in the forest where it stopped running. And the young woman saw that its ribs were going like this. It was absolutely exhausted, this hare, and it was turning and looking, and its eyes were bulging out of its head in fear. It looked terrified, this hare. But it was so tired it didn't notice. The young woman just stopped her horse behind it and slipped from the saddle and tiptoed up behind the hare and lift a rock above its head and bring it down with a decisive crack. She picked the hare up by its ears and she thought that will sell well at market. And she plopped it in one of the leather panniers on the side of her horse, mounted the pony and carried on through the forest, and she rode feeling very pleased with herself. That would sell well and get her some extra cash. And the pony started rocking her again, just like your donkey didn't. And again she felt herself sinking into sleep. But then she had another sound. And the sound was very, very thin, carrying on the cold air like a shrill howl. And she realised it was the howl of a hound somewhere in the distance. And she stopped the pony again. And she listened. And very distantly she could hear the sound of hooves. More than two though, quite a few. Could you make the sound of hooves? And this sound got louder and louder and The woman sat on her pony, feeling and hearing the unmistakable sound of a hunt coming towards her, but she couldn't see anything. And suddenly the sound got so loud that it rumbled the whole ground under her feet, and then suddenly 12 riders burst through the trees. They ripped through the leaves. They travelled through the night, 12 enormous black riders on huge horses. And they skirted all around the young woman and then came to a juddering halt in front of her. All these horses, black, blue black, and the steam rising in rolls from their flanks. And these horses were massive, probably bigger than your donkey, about 15 hands high. And each of them had a black-clad rider on its back, staring at the young woman. She sat there in her pony, and she looked at the rider at the head of the pack on the biggest horse, and she looked him up and down, and he was darker than the rest. The moon shone off his greasy black hair, and he had a pale greenish face with flint-like eyes and a nose as long and sharp as a raven's beak. And when the young woman looked to the 2 feet that were in the stirrups of his mount, she could see that the 2 feet were cloven. And there was a whiff of smoke coming off his mouth. And the young woman knew exactly who he was. And she knew that he rode abroad at the passing of the night. But she never, ever thought she'd come face to face with him. And the flint-eyed rider looked down at her, and he sniffed the air as though he was drinking in the whole dark wood. And he leaned forward and said in a voice that prickled with wickedness, "It's been many a year since someone's crossed my path. What brings a young woman like yourself, alone, on horseback, to the very centre of the wood at the very edge of day?" The young woman in the saddle could not look at this man. She stared at the ground, trembling, and she said, "Please, I'm on a very long journey. I just wish to pass quietly through this wood." And the flint-eyed rider said, "The last soul to cross my path was not permitted to pass quietly through this wood. The last soul to cross my path never left this wood." The young woman sat in the saddle, trying not to show how much she was trembling, and she quickly eyed the 11 other dark-clad riders behind this really scary one, and they all had leather gloves on their hands. And their horses started to claw, to paw, to hoof at the ground impatiently. The flint-eyed rider looked down at his own steed, and he smiled, and he said to the young woman, "It appears that tonight you are fortunate, young lady. Our horses are impatient for the hunt. You may pass, but tell us this first. A hare outran us tonight, a young female. There is only one in this forest. Did you see which way it passed?" That's a tricky question to answer, isn't it? The young woman knew that the hare had passed her. She knew because she clonked it on the head, picked it up by the ears, and put it in her pannier. And it was there, dead. And these riders wanted it to hunt. What would she do? Could she hand over the hare dead? What would they do to her then? Could she lie to them? Could they see into her soul? She wasn't sure. She wasn't going to help them. So she sat bolt upright in her saddle, and she eyed the flint-eyed rider for the first time, and she said, "A hare did cross my path, yes. It leapt out of the bushes yonder, and it almost startled my poor pony. I believe it went westward." And she pointed dead in front of her. Now one of the riders, she was sure, was looking at the pannier on the side of her horse, and she just held her breath. A long moment passed, and then the flint-eyed rider said, "Till our paths cross again." He kicked his horse on, and 11 and his horses all tore through the hole, the gap in the night, and disappeared, sending a cloud of moths scattering like a sack of flour overhead, these white moths just scattering round. And when they'd completely settled, and when the leaves had stopped moving, and the dust had reached the ground again, that's when the young woman allowed herself to breathe a sigh of relief. Thank the Lord for that, she thought to herself. But as soon as she breathed her sigh of relief, something started moving on the side of her horse. The pannier started twitching, and it was the hare. It was actually alive. She must have only stunned it. And she thought, oh my goodness, thank gosh, that the hare didn't start coming to life when the riders were here. And she tried to struggle with the buckle to get the hare out of the pannier, but her fingers were ice cold. It was really difficult to get this brass buckle undone. Eventually, the flap of the pannier flew open as if in frustration, and the tawny head of this hare shot up out of the bag, right up, and the body following it, unfolding like a paper chain, spinning and whirling in the sky. A tumult of brown and white, and it hit the ground. And again the leaves went up, and again they settled. And this time they settled not around a hare, but around a figure standing in the dust in front of this horse. And it was the figure of a young girl, not much older than you. And she had dark, tawny hair, just like yours, but it fell in great wild swathes and coils. And she had dark, wild eyes bulging with fear. And above her head, her eyebrow, she had a tiny bruise as if someone had hit her. And she looked stunned. Not as stunned as the woman in the pony saddle, though. She said, who are you? The young girl stretched her arms out and looked at them as though she'd never seen them before. And she said, I don't know. I don't know who I am. It's been so long since I've taken this form. I forgot what it's like to stand upright. Those riders, she said. I crossed their path years ago. They changed me to a hare, and they said that they would be at my heels every night unless I found a way to put myself at theirs. But then, tonight, I'd outrun them nearly every night of my life as a hare, but tonight I thought I couldn't go on. I thought they'd catch me. But then you came, you took me up, and you hit me. And when they came and asked for me, I thought you would definitely hand me over, but you didn't. And when they rode on, suddenly I was at their heels. So now I think I'm free. How can I ever thank you? And the young woman sitting in the pony suddenly felt the chill of the world fill her bones. She smiled down at the young girl and she said, there's no need to thank me. Perhaps you could join me on my ride, because it's still a long way till dawn, and I'm suddenly very, very afraid. And she helped the young girl onto the back of her pony, kicked the horse on, and together they rode out eastward towards the golden sweep of dawn.